Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fate, Luck and Choice with my good friend and colleague Adrian Saville. We've got off to an extraordinary start to the year, and we thought this first episode would be kind of taking stock of what's going on in the world away from South Africa, and whether we are in a new world order. Many of you would have seen or read about Mark Carney's speech at Davos, in which he really laid out a route for middle powers trying to deal with the antagonism of the USA on trade and tariffs and geopolitics. And the question is, we're not in a transition, he said, we're in a rupture, and that we're in a different system now. So we're going to talk about that a bit today, about how do we see this and where do we think it's going? What do you think, Adrian?
Nick, at the start of a year, it's tempting to talk about, look at all the incredible things that have happened, and certainly given the start of 26, $5,000 gold, $100 silver, fences around Greenland, etc. But the pace at which things are moving possibly means that by the time our voices get into public domain, these might be ancient artifacts. So your suggestion, that this is a moment of fragmentation, fracturing, fractionalization, I think that is a very sensible way to get off the dance floor of moment by moment news and onto the balcony and think about what here is going to be permanent, what sticks around. And I understand that there's only a handful of people who have received standing ovations at Davos, and Mark Carney was one of them.
What do you make of this idea of middle powers coming together?
Yeah, that to me is one of the very sensible perspectives on a world that, as it falls into pieces, there's some very obvious big pieces that pull in different directions. We can quickly go to, those big default pieces: United States, China, India, growing moment by moment, and of course, Russia. These are the established, somewhat weaker, some getting stronger mega powers,
hegemons.
But it's the things in between that are going to be the margin movers. And this reference to middle-sized powers is a fantastic lens for thinking about the world. Now the question is, who satisfies the criteria for being sufficiently mid-sized and sufficiently capable that they can matter?
Right. I've thought about that. I'm sure you have too. What will you say?
There's some that, obviously we can put in, right away. You and I have spoken regularly about Poland. And Poland, I think, quickly satisfies the criteria of being mid-sized, increasingly mid-sized, competitive, strategically. It really matters. Then there's markets, countries that could actually satisfy the criteria, but easily face in multiple directions. We could call them sort of strategically polygamous. Turkey,
right?
Might be a good case
agile, non-aligned, as Jorge Heine said in his book.
Yeah. So those are the first two I drop into the hat. Yours?
That's fantastic. So Poland is a regional power, and that does have independence. I ended up calling them independent middle powers, IMPs. So speedboats around the big battleships that are running around. I think Australia has some sway. I would pick Brazil. Yeah. Some of the BRIC countries. India is multipolar, I think. So some of Southeast Asia is American aligned and China aligned and America aligned. You can divide it. And South Africa, I think, qualifies for this because of our regional position and the fact that we are the African advanced economy. In spite of our lack of growth, we are a strategic player.
The one question I suppose I'd put over your reference to India is, as things stand, India is still relatively modest, compared to
big but modest.
However, give it another 10 or 15 years with 7% economic growth,
but it may face some. Why I wouldn't include India actually, is it may face some strategic long-term dilemmas. Does it cooperate with China? It faces the US problem. Does it cooperate with China? Does it compete with China? It's English language country. It's open to the West. It
Well,
trades
at the
with
moment,
West.
it's able to face both ways.
That's the point I'm making.
Yeah.
Might it, and you made this point, might it get forced to choose?
And so let's play that game.
Yeah.
If India is forced to choose, which way?
I think it's too early to tell. The pressure's not big enough yet.
Okay.
Then South Africa. We call ourselves non-aligned, but are we really non-aligned? And I think we give confusing signals, as we know. So let's go out of that into our take on China. China's been so quiet relative to all the rattle and fume and fury out of Washington. Any take on China?
Well, China, one of the things that is happening in that market is, if we rewind to the 1970s, and this is what I really enjoy about our conversations, is we're able to get out of the month-to-month and quarter-writer stuff and look at long sweeps. If we go to the 1970s, where China really first starts opening up for the first time since the 1940s, they make a quick advance onto the global stage. There are improvements in transparency, institutional strength. And if we had had this conversation 15 years back, my suspicion would be this is the next big superpower market with strong institutions. And where I'm confused in what's going on is, historically, our big superpower is now retreating on institutional strength. And China has possibly given this up.
You're referring to?
The United States.
Yes.
But China, how could you be confused in that?
Exactly, exactly.
But China seems to have given up the march that they could have stolen on that under Xi.
That's my point about it being so quiet.
Yeah, and it seems
it's
like
domestic.
It's returning or reverting to strong local domestic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because historically China has collapsed so many times. China's great nightmare has always been like Tiananmen. It was chaos. They've had chaos so many times. They're a highly ordered, hierarchical, systemic society and culture. So it's quiet because it's not banging some big drum. And it's just so noticeable that this superpower, which must rank now as an equal to the US, is so quiet. Let me ask you a different question. What do you make of Europe at the moment?
Well, I'm going to jump. Let's come back to Europe. I thought Poland counted, but we can come back to talk more about Europe. You led with in a conversation.
No, I meant Europe as a region.
Okay.
As a superpower.
Well, I mean, let's park that for a second. I didn't want to let go of the imps just for a moment. And in Latin America, given the size and structure of economies in the region, I think you've got we're perhaps a little more spoiled for choice about the imps. Mexico would be, to my mind, a good case in point to join Canada.
Sure.
Chile, you mentioned Brazil. Argentina,
still
perhaps
messy.
Too messy and too marginal.
Yep.
But that already gives you sort of a good
grounding.
A good handful of mid-sized economies that can make real noise. So
my
now
picks,
Europe.
we'll come back to Europe, but my picks in Africa would be Egypt, Morocco, and South Africa. Less so Nigeria now.
Most definitely, and we've done recently published a refresh of the Where to Invest in Africa work. Morocco sits right at the top. Egypt, powerful. South Africa, right at the top. The ones that stand out in terms of their competitive advantages, what we would call permanent advantages, right at the top of the list are actually very, very small. Seychelles, Mauritius.
Right. Small speedboats.
So the small speedboats. So the ones that are big, and would rank as these mid-sized, you've listed them. Algeria is probably worth also putting
long shot
just into just into the conversation.
It's that Mediterranean basin.
Yeah,
it's the influence of Europe.
Yeah.
So let's leave that and say the middle powers might or might not come together, because it's hard to bring them together. They're so different.
The voices are so different.
Yeah, they'd have to create some kind of institutional linkages. They might play softly with each other and look for hedging their trade and de-escalating their trade with the US. But let's come to Europe just for a minute, because I think Europe is also fascinating. It's this huge, sophisticated, old economy. Seems very stagnant. I was talking yesterday to someone in Germany about, what's going on. It's not only the popular right wing, but the economy seems stagnant. Germany unable to lead Europe. What's your take on Europe's longer term future?
They've got a real structural challenge, and that's the absence of babies. That's almost a European-wide attribute. There's some very interesting data which challenges the perception about Europe. And the perception is Europe is sluggish, they're losing their competitiveness, not much to see here, folks, move on. And a lot of the data, certainly the productivity data, which is one of the best metrics of competitiveness, squares up to that perception, that if you adjust for good things like per capita, working hours, size of corporations, etc., European firms are quietly more competitive than the perception would have it. I think the problem that Europe faces right now might even be existential, that how on earth do they deal with what's going on globally? Because isn't it interesting, when we started this conversation, we spoke about the superpowers, we spoke about the US, China.
We didn't talk about Europe. That's why I'm raising it. Europe should be the third big...
And it's missing in action.
And that's because, of course, it's not a nation.
But that's their own doing. This is where the strong voice needs to come through and says, this is how we A, align, and B, assert ourselves.
I was thinking about this in the break, because these United States, which is what the president says when he's inaugurated, these United States was the consolidation of all the different states in America. Why was there these United States of Latin America? And that leads us then to the great project of the EEC becoming the EU. But somehow it's just not got the last lap.
It hasn't done that.
It hasn't done that last thing. That, of course, is very understandable, because it has a deep, deep history of differentiation.
Sure.
You can't compare Norway to Bulgaria or Bulgaria to Spain. They have very different histories. They fought each other a great deal. So maybe that's what's very hard. Does the shock of Russia, the threat of Russia, not America, does the threat of Russia mobilize it?
Perhaps it's that crisis that calls it into action, or that threat of crisis, which seems increasingly real. And that, that's why my head, when we said, Europe, went immediately to Poland, because that is the doorstep.
Yep.
That's where the boots on ground would become
so important.
Yeah.
Last few minutes, let's move to Washington. And let's ask ourselves just briefly as we end about this Trumpian world we're living in. I was saying to you earlier, I've lived in America a lot, visited there a lot. I've studied American politics all my life. I have never, ever seen anything like this from an established democracy. His manner, his approach, his narcissism, his strategic ambiguity and contradictions, his willingness to just misrepresent things. And yet the American economy looks really good. Stock market's good, the growth rate's good, inflation's under control. Just one thought from you as we wrap up on where this goes in the next year or two.
You say one, let me try three. So first thought, unprecedented. I agree with you. This is in our study of history, we haven't seen anything like this. And in our lived experience, we haven't seen anything like this. The second thought that springs to mind is we can spend hours and hours deliberating, but what I love is the commentary that's coming out of markets. Rewind to my opening observation about $5,000 gold and $100 silver. I think there is a big statement being made in those markets.
Which is?
That, well, it allows me to make my third observation, which is there's been a slow decline in people holding US assets as diffusers of risk. And it isn't just specific to the Trump administration. So let's not get too caught up in what's going on in the here and now. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. And while this is alarming, but I'm saying there is a much steadier march that's been going on. And so Strategy also is about not being distracted by the noise. I'm not saying these things don't matter, but let's step back and get a sense of the bigger picture.
But where does that leave you on the economic prospects for the USA?
The economic prospects remain good.
Good.
If
Markets don't lie.
Markets don't lie, but if I arrived in this room and I offered you a sack of currency, you'd probably still take the dollar by default. And so that remains the currency of default. Where my broad optimism on the US would run into trouble is if the US dollar is no longer accepted in international exchange, then all bets are off. That's too far away to see for now.
I agree with that. But it could happen slowly.
And that is what's
currency
been happening.
is the sign of decline of civilizations, as we know from history.
That's what the empire story tells us.
Exactly. So, of course, one of the indicators for a declining civilization is the debasement of its currency. And maybe this would be a gradual thing, hopefully not, in the case of the USA.
One of the things that can accelerate that or amplify it, and perhaps we're seeing that in this moment, are the choices that are being made in our ongoing conversation about fate, luck, and choice. The fate is good. The choices seem to be against that good fate.
I think that's true. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time.